The Deep Dive podcast is brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and visit our blogs at x9intel.com.
Hey everyone, I'm Neil.
And I'm Alexis. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into, brain-computer interfaces.
Yeah, BCIs.
BCIs. You shared some really fascinating material with me, focusing on the potential to restore, independence for people who have lost it, and it's incredible stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is cutting-edge stuff, and we're going to be talking about a technical report from UC San Francisco.
Right.
That details how a paralyzed man was able to control a robotic arm just by thinking about it.
Right.
It's pretty amazing. And we'll be drawing from a YouTube lesson that kind of explains how BCIs work from the BCI guy.
The BCI guy, yeah.
As well as an X9 Intelligence blog post.
Right.
That analyzes the implications of this breakthrough. So
really diving deep today.
Yeah.
Right.
We're going to be unpacking how this man was able to command a robotic arm with just his thoughts.
Right.
The role that AI played in making this happen, and what it means for restoring human dignity through technology.
Absolutely. And so we'll be clarifying some key concepts for you and hopefully highlighting why this is such a huge step forward for, BCIs.
Definitely.
Okay, so brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. For someone just tuning in, what are we talking about here? What is that?
So a BCI is a pathway between the brain and an external device. So like a computer or, in this case, a robotic arm.
Right.
And the aim is to bypass traditional methods of control, like using our muscles or speaking.
Right.
And instead, just use our thoughts to interact with technology.
Wow.
The YouTube video we're referencing today from the BCI guy explains how the initial focus of this technology has been medical applications for individuals with limited communication.
Right.
Or motor capabilities. Okay. And that's due to the high cost and the risk associated with the invasive procedures.
Right.
So if you have to have brain surgery to have this technology, it's a high bar.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they would start with, the people who would benefit the most from something like that.
Absolutely.
Given the risks.
Right. And he does touch on the trade-offs between different types of BCIs, like EEG, which is non-invasive.
Right.
But it doesn't provide the same level of clarity and control as an invasive BCI.
Right.
So you're weighing the benefits with the risks there.
Right. I mean, it's a trade-off, right? If you want that really granular, fine-grained control,
right,
you have to have a more invasive procedure.
Right, exactly.
So the BCI guy breaks down a BCI system into three fundamental parts. What are those three parts?
So any BCI system has three main stages.
Okay.
First is the hardware.
Okay.
That detects and records the brain signals.
Okay.
Then you have software.
Right.
That processes this raw data into a format that a computer can understand.
Okay.
And then the third stage is the output stage.
Yeah.
And this is where those processed signals generate an action in an external device, like a robotic arm.
Okay, so the hardware picks up the signal, the software makes sense of it, and then the output is the robotic arm moving or whatever it is that we want it to do.
Exactly.
Right. And I recall the BCI guy mentioning a big challenge in getting all of this to work.
Yes.
And that is noise.
Right.
And the brain signals. It's not like our brains transmit perfectly clear, signals.
Our brains are very noisy places.
Right.
There's electrical signals coming from all over our body.
Right.
Muscle movements, heartbeat, nearby electronics, power lines, you name it.
Oh, wow.
It's all interfering with those faint little brain cell signals that we're trying to measure.
So how do researchers even begin to filter out all of that interference to get to the actual brain signals?
Well, that's where signal processing comes in.
Okay.
It's a combination of hardware and software.
Right.
And it's all about isolating those neurological signals of interest from all that background static.
Right.
He mentioned bandstop filters as a common method. And he gave the example of a notch filter, which is used to remove the 60 hertz frequency, which is the frequency of our power grid,
right,
which can be a significant source of interference.
Right. So they're trying to pull out that, needle from the haystack.
Exactly.
So they have the brain signals, they're filtering out the noise. How do they then translate those signals into commands for a device?
That's where machine learning comes in.
Okay.
So once the data is cleaned up, algorithms are used to find patterns
right
in that brain data.
Okay.
And that's how they figure out which brain activity patterns correspond to different actions.
And he gave a simple example about, imagining moving a cursor on a computer screen.
Yes.
Can you walk us through that concept again?
Sure. So imagine you're hooked up to a BCI.
Okay.
And you're asked to imagine moving a cursor up, down, left, right.
Okay.
Each time you think that, your brain activity is recorded.
Okay.
And it's time-stamped.
Okay.
So you have this collection of data that links specific brain activity to the intended direction.
Right.
And then you feed all of that data into a computer.
Okay.
And you tell the computer, hey, during these 50 instances, the person was thinking about moving right.
Okay.
So the computer can analyze that data and find the brainwave patterns that consistently occurred when the person had that thought.
Okay.
And from there, the algorithm creates a sort of neural signature for that thought.
Wow.
Then in real time, if the BCI detects that brain signal pattern again, it can trigger the cursor to move to the right.
Wow, that's incredible. So the AI is essentially learning how to read your mind.
Yeah, in a way.
And what kind of brain data are we talking about here? How do they measure it?
So there are two key aspects of brain data that researchers are interested in.
Okay.
One is the frequency at which neurons are firing, so the speed of that electrical activity.
Okay.
And then the other is the timing, or the time domain, which helps to determine when a specific event occurs.
Gotcha. Okay, so the frequency tells us how fast things are happening, and the timing tells us, when it's happening.
Exactly.
And how is that information helpful in building a BCI?
So analyzing the timing can help to predict when an event might be about to happen.
Okay.
For example, the anticipation of a movement.
Okay.
Then the frequency domain, which is the frequency of the brain waves, helps us understand how different populations of neurons are working together.
Okay.
And, different frequencies are associated with different brain states and activities.
I don't recall there's different categories of these brainwaves, right?
Yeah, like delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma.
Right.
It's not just one uniform type of signal, is it?
No, yeah. So how do those different brainwaves play a role in BCI development?
Well, when neurons fire in a synchronized manner at a particular frequency, this indicates a coordinated effort in that brain region. And by examining those frequency patterns, researchers can gain insight into how different brain regions communicate with each other.
Okay.
And, how they contribute to different functions like motor control.
Okay.
And in the YouTube video, the BCI guy gave the example of moo rhythms.
Okay.
Which are a type of alpha wave.
Okay.
And they're typically observed over the motor cortex when the body is at rest.
Okay.
And when a person performs or even imagines a movement, there's a decrease in those moo rhythms.
So it's like the brain is quieting down in a certain area to prepare for movement.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this is called desynchronization.
Desynchronization, okay.
Yeah.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are two different types of BCIs, right? Asynchronous and synchronous.
Yes, you're right.
Could you explain that a bit more?
Sure. So the fundamental difference lies in whether the BCI relies on brain signals that are generated in response to an external stimulus, which would be synchronous, or if it relies on brain signals that are self-initiated, which is asynchronous.
Okay.
So in other words, asynchronous BCIs are self-paced.
Go.
The user can exert control without needing some sort of external cue or prompt.
So that's what we see with things like, motor imagery.
Exactly.
Where you imagine the movement.
Right. And this is particularly promising for individuals with paralysis or other motor impairments.
Right.
Because it offers them a way to interact with their environment or communicate their intentions.
Right.
When they don't have the ability to do so through their physical actions.
Okay. And that brings us to the study that we're focusing on today.
Right.
The UCSF study, where the paralyzed man controlled a robotic arm.
Exactly.
That would be classified as an asynchronous BCI using motor imagery, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so with that basic understanding of BCIs, let's get into the specifics of this UCSF achievement. What did they manage to do here?
So researchers enabled a man who had been paralyzed for many years due to a stroke to operate a robotic arm simply by imagining those movements.
So this man, he couldn't move, he couldn't speak.
Right.
And they were able to allow him to control this robotic arm with his mind.
Exactly. He was able to grasp objects, move them, release them, all with his thoughts.
So a direct link between mind and machine?
That's right.
That's pretty incredible. And the article emphasizes that this BCI worked for 7 months.
Right.
Without needing major recalibration. Why is that extended period of stable operation so important?
Reliability is huge in the field of BCIs.
Okay.
In the past, BCIs have tended to lose accuracy and effectiveness over time, sometimes even just days.
Oh, wow.
The innovation in this UCSF study was the AI model they used.
Okay.
It was able to learn and adapt to the changes in the participants' brain activity patterns over time.
So the AI wasn't static.
Right.
It was able to change along with the participant.
Exactly.
As he learned how to use the BCI.
So that's right.
And so this is what Dr. Ganguly referred to as a blending of learning between humans and AI. Exactly.
So it wasn't just the AI interpreting the signals. There was this active learning process happening on both sides.
Yes.
And they also found that the brain's representations of movement can change over time, right?
Yes. They noticed that in animal models, while the fundamental patterns for different types of movements remain consistent, the precise location of those patterns within the brain can shift.
Okay.
And they hypothesized that the same thing might be happening in humans.
Okay.
And so in this study, they confirmed that the location of the patterns did indeed drift from day to day.
Okay.
But the AI was able to track and compensate for those shifts.
Wow. So it's like the AI is learning how to read the brain's language.
That's a great way to put it.
And the article also mentioned that the participant went through a virtual training phase before he used the real robotic arm.
Right.
What was the purpose of that?
So before using the physical robotic arm, he trained with a virtual version.
Okay.
And this gave him feedback on how well his imagined movements were being translated.
And this practice in the virtual world allowed him to refine his mental imagery strategies.
Okay.
And basically learn the control language of the BCI.
Gotcha. So it was like training wheels.
Exactly.
Before he got on the real bike.
Right.
And what kind of things could he do with the robotic arm?
He was able to do things like pick up objects, move them, rotate them, and place them in different locations.
Okay.
And he could even open a cabinet door, retrieve a bottle, and position it under a water dispenser.
Wow.
Pretty incredible for someone who can't move their own limbs.
Yeah, I mean, those are things that, we take for granted every day.
Right.
But for someone who has lost that ability, it's life-changing.
Absolutely.
And all of that with just 15-minute tune-ups.
Yeah, which is a vast improvement over earlier BCI systems that required daily or even more frequent recalibration.
Right.
This AI-powered system is very robust and adaptive.
Right. And the X9 Intelligence blog really emphasizes that.
Yes, they do. They point out that the AI's ability to continuously learn and refine its understanding of the user's neural patterns was key to achieving that 7 month period of stable connection.
And they describe it as the AI learning the brain like a language.
Right.
What do you think they mean by that?
I think they mean that the AI is constantly learning the nuances of the individual's brain signals.
Okay.
It's not a one-time translation. It's an ongoing process of understanding and adapting to the brain's language.
Wow.
Which allows for a much more natural and intuitive control.
Right. And the blog also highlights how this adaptive AI not only expands the capabilities of the BCI,
right,
but also enhances its reliability.
Right, which is crucial for a technology like this.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's going to be used in a real-world setting,
right,
it needs to be something that people can depend on.
Exactly.
And finally, let's talk about the broader implications of this work.
Okay.
Both the UCSF article and the X9 Intelligence blog touch upon the idea of restoring human dignity through this kind of technology. Yes.
That's a really powerful concept.
It is. The blog really emphasizes that this is about restoring independence and human dignity for people with paralysis.
Right. It's not just about the scientific advancement, but about the impact it has on people's lives.
Exactly. It's about giving them back a sense of control and autonomy.
And Dr. Ganguly said that they've learned how to build the system to make this work.
Right.
Which sounds incredibly promising.
It is. It suggests that this isn't just a one-off demonstration,
right,
but a real step towards developing practical BCI systems.
That can really help people.
Yes. And the X9 Intelligence blog calls this research a call to action for developing human-first AI and robotics.
Right. The idea is not to replace humans, but to restore what's been lost.
Exactly.
That's a really powerful message. So, to wrap up our deep dive today, we've talked about how BCIs work, the incredible achievement of a paralyzed individual controlling a robotic arm with his thoughts, thanks to this AI, and the potential this holds for restoring independence and dignity. Right, and we've only scratched the surface here.
Absolutely.
This technology is still in its early stages, but it has the potential to revolutionize how we interact with the world around us.
And what other applications might be possible in the future beyond medical needs?
Exactly.
As this technology continues to evolve.
Right.
It's something to think about.
Definitely.
Please share your thoughts on this deep dive in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
The Deep Dive podcast is brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and visit our blogs at x9intel.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, so please leave us a comment and let us know what you think.